Thank you, Mary Beth, and thank you all for being here tonight. We have a great crowd. We have a great panel, and we hope you enjoy this. And as Mary Beth said, we hope you learn something. We're all here to learn. So what we're going to do is I have a number of questions, and I'm going to start out by addressing each question to one of the panelists. And then following the response from that initial person, I'll ask the remainder of the panel to respond to the question. There may be a couple in there where the entire panel does not respond, but you'll know, I'll let you know if you need to answer. So let's get started, and again, enjoy this, okay? All right, the first question is to Congressman Meuser. As a background, sir, you are a co-sponsor of House Joint Resolution 163, and that is a joint resolution providing for congressional disapproval of the rules submitted by the Environmental Protection Agency relating to new source performance standards for greenhouse gas emissions from new, modified, and reconstructed fossil fuel-fired electric generating units, emission guidelines for greenhouse gas emissions from existing fossil fuel-fired electric generation units, and repeal of the Affordable Clean Energy Rule that was published in the Federal Register on May 9th, 2024. And EPA can do nothing simply. It has to be a mouthful when they describe the regulation. So under that regulation, coal plants that plan to stay open beyond 2039 would have to reduce or capture 90% of their CO2 emissions by 2032. Coal plants that are scheduled to close by 2039 would have to cut emissions 16% by 2030, while those that are set to retire by 2032 would be exempted from the new rule. So here's my question. If that EPA final regulation is implemented, what do you believe will be the impacts of that regulation to both the coal industry and the electric grid?
In a word, devastating. And that's why we're fighting so strongly against it through letters, through meetings, through, as you said, a CRA, we call it, in order to repeal the executive order issued by the Biden administration. And as well, we have some legislation that's been introduced as well to repeal the Clean Power Plan 2.0. You know, when President Obama was in office, we had Clean Power Plan 1.0, and we all adjusted to that, and we improved the pollutant controls and carbon emissions by somewhere in the neighborhood of 20%. In my district, by the way, I have quite a bit of anthracite coal throughout the central area of my district, Schuylkill County and elsewhere, a number of coal producers. And I have natural gas as well up in the northern part of my district. And energy is very important, clearly, for my district. It's very important for Pennsylvania. It's very important for America, very important for the world. So why is it that we know our natural gas and our coal development and production, as well as our oil, is done the cleanest in the world? The whole world needs these so-called fossil fuels. You know, I have many friends on the other side of the aisle, I happen to be a Republican, that love saying all of the above, all of the above. And I say, yes, all of the above, but all of the below too, okay? Because we have to be economically realistic, economically feasible is what sort of transitions are made as we go towards minimizing carbon emissions. And that's really what it comes down to, right? I mean, it's about carbon emissions, not necessarily whether it's oil, coal, or natural gas. I mean, the idea is to try to, as far as from an environmental standpoint, to minimize the level of emissions. And there's a lot of technologies that aren't completely ready yet that will help do that. But in the meantime, we can be the most responsible producer of coal, of natural gas, of oil in the world. And yet, we have some that want to minimize and prohibit the continued production and our capacities, driving gasoline prices, in some cases, through the roof, making us vulnerable to every geopolitical event that occurs, right? Gasoline spikes when they've got Middle East issues and invasions by rogue nations such as Russia into the Ukraine. And yet, if we could maintain our not just energy independence, again, done in the cleanest way there is. In fact, our carbon emissions, the United States have been reduced over the last 5 years. The only advanced economic nation that has reduced our carbon emissions, even though we during Trump's era anyway, we pulled out of the so-called Paris Climate Accords. And yet we have an administration right now, there's no other way of saying it, that won't allow the continued development of such a clean and unbelievably important opportunity, not just economically, but national security-wise as well. So it's a constant fight. Many of us, we have our energy task forces. Every committee, I'm on financial services, but energy and commerce, ways and means. Energy is pretty much the center for taxes, for regulations, for permitting, and for investment. I mean, we have a chairman of the SEC right now by the name of Gary Gensler, whom thinks it's a wonderful idea to impose, and he would have if left unchecked, all kinds of ESG requirements on your portfolios. And so that's even the CEOs of BlackRock and others stated how that's against our fiduciary responsibility to look. We want to engage there, but we're not going to do it at the expense of our fiduciary responsibilities to our clients. So there's a lot of things being done wrong right now. We're in a constant fight. Sometimes I say those policies are gas backwards, if you'll forgive me. But we need to be real about this, and not being knuckle dragging, so-called deniers of climate change, right? We can do both, and we have to. We don't have a choice. The need for energy is going to expand, even if every Paris climate metric was hit over the next 10 years. The need for coal and oil and natural gas will increase by 30 to 40% over the next 10 years. So they like to say that we're at capacity. We're at capacity because of the level of permitting and everything else. We could increase that capacity by a lot if we do it responsibly. And you got to put a timer on me, so I'll.
No, that's fine.
Sorry.
That's fine. Same question to the remainder of the panel. If you'd like to add anything, if the final reg is implemented, what do you think is going to be the impact to that? Yes, Senator. This one.
Thank you, Paige. Thank you, Congressman, for that, because it hit the nail on the head. But to be a little bit more in the weeds, the demand for energy is going to skyrocket with AI and with data storage centers all over the country. We'd like for some of them to come to Pennsylvania. That'd be great. We'd love for more manufacturing industry to use the energy sources we have right under our feet. Coal we could use for 200 more years. Very efficiently, very effectively, much, much, much cleaner than China. And if this EPA disaster is implemented, God forbid we don't hold it back or get a new administration who understands how idiotic it is, we would see most of our coal leaving Pennsylvania, leaving America, and heading to China, heading to India, where their regulations are nothing like what we have here. So we would be losing that energy efficiency and giving it to our competitors and people who don't like us very much. A couple other things about that is that if we want to capture or reduce by 90% of the CO2 emissions by 2032, we can do it. We actually have a step in the right direction for technology right here in Pennsylvania. We just passed SB 831, literally at the gong of the last few minutes when we finished the last day of session, and that is the Senator Yaw bill, and that sets the stage, that sets the parameters for eventual carbon capture and sequestration. And what people need to understand is that coal costs, let's say coal costs to burn is $5 a ton. That emits 2 tons of CO2. If we capture that CO2, we can literally get paid by the federal government $1.70 a ton. That's insane. We could be making billions and billions and billions of dollars by doing what the environmentalists want us to do. We have the technology coming online. We have the platform in legislation getting ready to make that eventuality possibly happen here in Pennsylvania. So I look forward to more technology coming down the pike. Another point is that if we want 90% of emissions to be captured or reduced, anthracite coal, their emission factor is 102.58. So they would need, it's 90% of capture you would have to do. Bituminous coal, which we have here in the Southwest, and probably about a third of Pennsylvania is bituminous, that emission factor is 92.53, meaning they would only have to capture 81.187%. So they would be saving with not needing to capture that higher percentage. So these are things that Pennsylvania really needs to take a good, close look at. If this is going to be a fact that we must capture or reduce by 90%, let's make plans and let's move forward to do just that and take advantage of literally billions, maybe trillions of dollars of federal funding in doing so.
Yes, Mitesh.
Thank you, Senator. I agree that technology can solve a lot of the problems, but the challenge that we have with this regulation is the timeline. The timelines are very tight. So right now, the coal power plants have three choices, which are all really false choices, if you think about it. One is you adopt a still developing technology. Second is to convert 40% of your heat input to natural gas. Or third is to shut down. None of these make sense, particularly when you talk about AI and data centers. The demand is growing, and we are trying to take away almost 20+% of our generation fleet out of commission. So when you look at those kind of situations, I think we are going to create a reliability issue for the grid, and it will impact all of us. AI, data centers, all these things need reliable power. And the two most dependable fuels that provide reliable power are nuclear energy and coal plants. So as you can see, we are not building nuclear plants in this country at the pace which is required. And coal plants are retiring, so we are dependent on less reliable sources like solar, wind. And when you look at solar and wind, they are intermittent by nature. So I think dependability is a crucial factor, which I think is being not considered as it should be.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Gleason?
I'll add to what Mitesh said on the timeline of things. You know, the Clean Power Plan 2.0, which the Congressman mentioned, is what's been kind of coined. It's not its official name. But it does have three factors. If power plants choose to do nothing by if they choose to close by 2032, they don't have to do anything. I think if they choose to close by 2039, they have to co-fire with 40% natural gas. And if they want to operate beyond 2039, they have to install CCS by 2032. And the technology just isn't there, not at scale. It does exist, but not at scale. So you're really presented with a challenge where, not really an opportunity, but a challenge, because the policy isn't matching the technology as far as being able to install that, which would take multiple years. You know, small modular nuclear reactors are something that's been talked about. It's really kind of a science project. We would have to build those at scale as well to replace the amount of gigawatts that are coming off the grid. And so really it comes down to a reliability issue. And once those plants are shut down, they can't just come back on. And also not mentioned is Clean Power Plan 2.0 also targets new natural gas. So while the EPA pulled existing natural gas out of the rule, but claims they're going to come up with a rule for them too, we're not going to see construction of new natural gas with that kind of threat. Now I will say, and this is a whole nother conversation if we even get into PJM, but when it comes to new natural gas, I think it was just last week, Calpine had mentioned that they want to invest in build some new assets because PJM's capacity auction prices were through the roof, so it kind of signaled the market to build. But they said, we're probably not going to do it in Pennsylvania because of regulatory uncertainty. And that's the same regulatory uncertainty that the Clean Power Plan 2.0 presents.
Well said. Thank you. back to Congressman Meuser. You mentioned a while ago additional things that Congress has done, and I think you were a signatory to a letter that went to EPA asking Michael Regan basically, what are you guys doing? I mean, you said it in a much more eloquent manner than that. Let me read you part of the letter. The letter that you and some of your colleagues in the House sent to Mr. Reagan, the EPA administrator, reads as follows. The final rule targets coal and new natural gas-fired electric generating, exacerbating concerns with the reliability of the electric grid in PJM's service area. As such, we request answers as to how your agency will ensure that residents and our constituents served by PJM do not lose access to reliable, affordable electricity. My question is this: have you gotten a response from EPA as a result of your letter?
Yes, we did get a response, and it was a very disappointing response, not necessarily a big surprise, stating that all the concerns that we outlined were taken into consideration, and they believe that they can move forward, even though PJM said, no, this will be major problems, drive up costs, minimize our ability to energize, and frankly, keep the lights on. You know, I don't think that they read the memo of where you folks write prosperity is possible, right? Mm-hmm. More jobs, affordable energy, lower inflation. Because these rules and taxes and regulations that they try to implement are destroying each one of those goals. I mean, it's of course the biggest driver of inflation are these types of regulations and some taxes too. Certainly not making energy affordable. It's making our food less affordable and making everything that's manufacturing, USA manufacturing, less competitive. And it's certainly destroying jobs at the same time.
Thank you, sir. So let's continue talking about PJM and what they think of the rule. Mitesh, this is for you. PJM is the Electric Grid Regional Transmission Organization for a region that includes 13 states and the District of Columbia. And PJM released a statement on May 8, 2024, in response to this EPA final reg that we've been talking about. And part of their statement reads as follows, and I'm going to quote here. The PJM, this is PJM saying this, what I'm going to read to you. The future demand for electricity cannot be met simply through renewables given their intermittent nature. Yet in the very years when we are projecting significant increases in the demand for electricity, the final rule may work to drive premature retirement of coal units that provide essential reliability services and dissuade new gas resources from coming online. The EPA has not sufficiently reconciled its compliance dates with the need for generation to meet dramatically increasing load demands on the system. And that's the end of the quote. So here's the premise. Long before PJM ever issued that statement, Consol Energy was looking ahead. And you guys saw the landscape and what the future needs of the electric grid could be. And in response to what the company could see down the road, it launched a public awareness campaign that advocates for a more measured, analytical, and moral approach to our nation's energy policies. Consol's Not So Fast campaign is aimed at educating the public about the nation's current and future grid needs and how energy policy should be approached. And finally, here's the question. Could you explain the reasoning behind Consol's Not So Fast campaign and why what you're trying to communicate to the public could be a wake-up call for everybody?
Thank you, Faith. And this is a topic which is very near and dear to us, not just personally myself, but as a company as well. So I think when we go out in the world, we hear a lot of myths and misinformation being perpetuated, saying coal demand is dying, we are not going to need coal anymore. And the reality is exactly the opposite. 2023 was a record year from a coal consumption standpoint globally. We consumed 8 billion tons of coal globally in 2023. And when you go to social media, I don't think people have that appreciation that coal is such a vital part of the energy mix, and so many people depend on it. So I think from our perspective, why it is important is, one, is obviously we are in the coal mining business and we want to correct some of the misinformation that's out there. But also, we want to be able to hire talented people that work in the coal mines, that work in our corporate offices, and everybody wants to be associated with an industry that is growing, not an industry that's going to die off. So when that kind of misinformation spreads, it hurts the employee morale as well, right? The Not So Fast campaign essentially is an awareness campaign for policymakers, for corporate management teams, as well as for employees and general public, on highlighting the importance of coal into the energy mix. I think when you look at the energy transition topics that we covered with PJM, but also globally, everybody is rushing towards net zero. And we are often ignoring obvious red flags during that transition. One of that is we are migrating towards electric vehicles, for example. So the BTUs are moving from oil to coal or electric sector. But at the same time, we are trying to reduce the coal burn as well as gas burn in the electric mix. So the market share of electricity is growing, but the generation fleet is shrinking. Makes no sense. Same thing when you look at some of the other important constraints like transmission lines. To achieve the net zero goals that are published, you're going to have to build 10 times, 2 times more transmission, 3 times more transmission lines, and you're not going to be able to achieve that with the current pace. For instance, you're going to need 10,000 miles of transmission lines every year. We are currently building 200 miles in 2023. So there's a big gap between what is required versus what we are going to achieve. And we are trying to educate people that we are moving very fast and we need to slow down the pace and have a more rational approach to energy transition.
Because transmission lines cost money,
Correct.
usually a lot of money.
And it's all inflationary. I'm sure inflation is at the top of everybody's mind right now. And you look at grocery bills, they are higher. But if what goes into grocery bill, transportation is a big factor in it. Energy prices are a big factor in it.
And for the rest of the panel, how do you all see the current energy policy setting timelines for this transition that we've been talking about away from fossil fuels to renewables? How do you all see this impacting the reliability of the grid? And how can this country meet its growing energy demands in the manner that Americans have come to expect, meaning I go over and I want to flip the light on and it better come on. And if not, I'm going to get mad and call somebody.
Well, I will build off what Mitesh said as far as their Not So Fast campaign and the coalhardtruth.com, which is the website. And I think it goes beyond power generation as well, and all of some of the other products that coal makes, such as cement, steel, contributes to those transmission lines, contributes to the production of windmills. It's a much more diverse resource than just the grid. But back to the grid, I mean, I focus in my role mostly on PJM. I follow MISO a little bit just because we're connected. I follow ERCOT because they're an island in Texas and have problems every winter and every summer. But we're really transitioning that reliable base load energy. Coal and natural gas are the only two that can ramp. Nuclear is the same all the time. So when you have spikes in the grid, we saw this during Winter Storm Elliott 2 Decembers ago, it was coal that saved the day. So there's it's a much deeper dive in the policy issues as far as the coordination between gas production and the market and the day ahead and when they have to commit to deliver to the grid. Batteries. Batteries everybody talks about, but they're not energy. Something has to charge the battery. So it's really just storage. So it's kind of scary when folks like PJM say there might be about 40 gigawatts of capacity coming offline in the next 10 years. And if there's 40 gigawatts replacing it, 96% of it is intermittent and renewable. And does not provide that constant base load. So I think we're going to be in crisis mode here pretty soon. PJM has said that they have enough electricity until I think spring 2026. And after that, we don't know what we're going to do. But again, back to what Mitesh said and the Not So Fast campaign, you know, until folks really realize the crisis that it is, I think people don't understand until there's a little bit of pain. And that's the sad part about this conversation.
Senator?
To pile on a little bit, when I hear people talk about electric cars, I call them coal cars.
Yeah.
Because that's really where they're getting the power to plug in their vehicle. And even when you look at some of our even newer, more modern neighborhoods and things that have recently been built, and they have the outlet and everything that you do, whatever, they need to have those things built into those neighborhoods to plug in an electric car. Many of them tell you, well, you can only have 4 of them in the whole neighborhood because the grid can't handle it. So my son, who is a pilot instructor, he lives in Mars, PA, and his first job teaching people to fly was at Latrobe Airport. Yeah, calculate that drive. And he thought, I know, I'll save gas, I'll get an electric car. Right. There is nowhere to charge that vehicle at the Latrobe Airport. So if he wanted to get home in the wintertime, he couldn't use the heater. If he wanted to get home in the summertime, he couldn't use the air conditioning. So he's really, really happy that he got the hell rid of that vehicle. And now he's working out of Washington County Airport. But he just said, well, there's nowhere to plug in. There's not,
Yeah.
Sure, you can save gasoline, but sit there, plug your vehicle in to your garage and listen to your meter spin around. So what money are you really saving? You're not. You're just not. And we don't have the grid to handle it. We don't have the grid to handle AI coming. We don't have the grid to handle data centers. We don't have the grid to handle a tough winter if we shut down all of our fossil fuels. We just don't. And the best way to do it is to let these industries do what they do best. That's research, development, science, modify what they do to bring cleaner and more reliable energy to Pennsylvania and America every day.
So in addition to the annoyance that your son experienced, what about the national security implications? What about that? Anybody on the panel?
Well, as stated, I mean, it's as much of a national security issue as it is a economic issue. If we're not at fulfilling our energy needs, another country will be doing so. And what's incredible is that those countries that are kind of adversarial with us and do bad things with their funds that they're created through their sale of energy, of oil, like Iran, are serious national security threats, not just to us, but to all of our allies, from Europe to Israel. You know, I'll just add this. I mean, just when we imposed, when President Biden's White House imposed prohibitions on all new LNG exports, the EU turned around and said, what are we supposed to do? They turned back to Russia.
Yeah.
So what's happening is Russia is now selling their natural gas, much more so to the EU. We're asking the American taxpayers to fund a war so the Ukrainians can defend themselves, which is the right thing to do, but here we're allowing at the same time Russia to enrich itself in selling to our allies because we won't for some reason. So, you know, if you can figure that one out, you'd be running for president.
Yes, Mitesh.
No, I think Congressman and I were having a brief conversation before this panel, and one of the things that don't really make common sense is U.S. is blessed with coal, natural gas, oil, all 3 sources of energy. And energy is instrumental for growth, economic growth, whatever, right? But if you look at China or other nations that are not as rich in energy resources, they're able to import that energy and enrich themselves. What is really strange is for us to keep restrictions on our own domestic energy and import solar panels from other countries, right? and make that as a cornerstone of our energy policy does not make a lot of common sense, but that's what's happening. We were talking about Japan, a country that does not have a lot of natural resources. They are still burning coal. India is buying US coal produced here in Pennsylvania, shipping it all the way across half the world and still burning coal. But we can't burn that coal. That makes no sense.
Good point. Anyone else have national security comment?
I'll tie back into the Not So Fast campaign. And other things that coal does is make steel. And I think it is absolutely terrifying that the United States makes about 7% of the steel in the world. China has the corner on the steel market. And we also only make about 2.2% of the pig iron. So of that 7%, 2.2 is traditional steel that's made through metallurgical coal, of which Pennsylvania has a lot of. U.S. Steel in Clairton in Pittsburgh is the largest blast furnace in the United States, and Pennsylvania producers send a lot of coal to U.S. Steel. But domestically, it's important that we maintain that production of pig iron. The only way to make new steel, you can recycle steel as much as you want, that's great, but you have to wait until you're at the end of the life of a building or the end of the life of a bridge or something to recycle that steel. And if you're sending that steel across the ocean for conflicts with our allies or conflicts, I hope not with the United States, we're not going to get that airplane or that boat or that ship back. So we need to maintain the ability for that production to exist here in the U.S.
Valid point. Senator, you have something else?
Yeah, and it was in 1918 was the peak of coal production in the United States. And because of that, we fought two wars, World War I and World War II. And if we weren't able to produce our own weapons, our own ships, and repair bridges and make all of those things, America will look very, very, very different today. We don't want to be in that predicament ever in our future. We need to keep that ability to build those kinds of things here. And if you've ever been in a building over 3 stories high, thank coal.
Yes, thank you, Senator. And my next question is for you also. It's about a study that's entitled The Economic Impact of the Coal Mining Industry in Pennsylvania. And that study was recently released, and it was prepared by the Allegheny Conference on Community Development for the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance. And my question is this: as Vice Chair of the Labor and Industry Committee of the Pennsylvania State Senate, how important is the coal industry to the district you represent and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
Well, again, Pennsylvania is the 3rd largest coal producing state in the country. And we produce, the production is totaling over 42 million tons in 2022 alone. The industry's faced a lot of challenges in recent years. A lot of them are the result from regulatory overreach, which is something that we also need to really pay attention to and not let environmental extremists dictate what everybody else's life is like. Despite the challenges, coal production in Pennsylvania continues to support over 17,000 direct, indirect, and induced jobs in the Commonwealth. And this industry contributes $4 billion annually to the state's economy. And it has operations and service provider company locations in nearly half of all Pennsylvania counties. So as the vice chair of labor and industry, and I was the chair for 4 years, all through COVID and everything, let me have a flashback on that one. We have seen the mass exodus of good, hardworking folks, our young people who've gone through college or they're in the building trades. There's not enough industry and manufacturing in Pennsylvania to try to keep these people here. We're losing population. We're losing the ability to entice capital investment. We're losing billions of dollars of capital investment in Pennsylvania, including any kind of manufacturing that would utilize coal or even natural gas for energy. We should see the lowest energy costs for any manufacturing right here in Pennsylvania, but we don't. We don't. We're not allowed to be producing it. We're not allowed to be using it. It's insane. And people should be tripping over themselves to come into Pennsylvania to do just that. And we don't see it. We see the opposite effect. And it's because of regulation, not just in Pennsylvania, but also across America. So those are things that we need to really focus on, and we really need to rein in permitting regulation, and we need to get rid of the filthy, nasty, dirty word in Pennsylvania, which is predictability. Predictability is a horrible word in Pennsylvania. We need to fix that, and coal is going to help us do that.
The remainder of the panel, any comments on the importance of coal to this state?
I'll just echo what Rachel said about the importance of the production of steel, right? Of course, we have U.S. Steel here, and we'll see what happens there. Without domestic coal production, we will not be able to develop our infrastructure, but worse yet, during a international crisis, i.e. a war, we would be in very, very serious trouble. And, you know, right now, our electric grid, 19% of it comes from coal. I'm not sure how many people know that, appreciate that. So as Cameron called it, them coal cars, I like that. That's exactly right.
Any other comments on Mitesh?
I'll just add to it, Rachel and PCA did a good job of putting together some stats on that. I think if you look at an average salary of a coal miner, it's around $111,000 a year, which is almost twice of what the average salary in Pennsylvania is. So I think that tells you these are very high-paying jobs, and they allow them to have a very good life and have a nice house and everything. But also, if you look at producers like us and the counties that we operate in, we are #1 private employer in Greene County, and we are also one of the top employers in Washington County. Coal mining helps us through Consol Cares Foundation do certain things that are beneficial to the community, whether it's donating to the volunteer fire department, whether it's funding the local hockey team, right? It allows you to participate in enriching the community overall, and we are really proud of that as well.
Thank you. And I was going to ask Ms. Gleason about the contribution of coal mining and your member companies to their communities and how it impacts every little town in Pennsylvania.
It really does. The Pennsylvania Coal Alliance, we have roughly, I think it's about 150 member companies right now, but they do participate. We do have membership in 22 of Pennsylvania's counties. So it's not just the coal industry it's not just the operators. It's not just the big guys like the Consols here in Greene County, or Alliance in Washington, or Iron Synergy in Cumberland, or Rosebud in Somerset, Cambria, Indiana, Armstrong, Jefferson, Clearfield. You know, it's the anthracite region too. While there's a little bit less production there, they really put us over the edge to get to #3 and beat out Illinois in that production number. And they do a lot of really, really great remining in that area. And as the senator mentioned, cleaning up some of the scars of the past when we supported 2 world wars. But a lot of our member companies, they're the manufacturers, they're the equipment support, the geologists, hydrologists, anything that ends in IST pretty much. They support the industry. So, these are folks that live and work and vote in these districts. And so the spread is really quite significant. And I will say one takeaway from that economic impact report is that the industry provides nearly $1 billion in direct wages. So not just indirect ancillary, but $1 billion in direct wages. And Mitesh is right, the average underground salary of a coal miner in Pennsylvania in 2023, I believe, was $111,000, which is a family sustaining wage.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm just going to add quickly, this whole AI and data center breakthroughs, new industry renaissance almost, that you're seeing markets, valuations and all, that's all going to go overseas if we don't have the grid capability. And Pennsylvania's got the best opportunity, perhaps outside of Texas, to gain these data centers and this AI and Bitcoin mining and so many other things. If we have the opportunity and the predictability, as Cameron said, for expansion and to have it available. We will blow it. If we stay in this Reggie or this Pacer that Governor Shapiro is now talking about, we will blow it. I mean, Amazon, they're looking at campuses in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of my district, for instance, where they know they could get access to coal and to natural gas and to have the energy for it. So, the next couple of years are really crucial on these issues.
Thank you. So let's talk about inflation, shall we? 2 years ago, we reached a 40-year peak in inflation nationally, and the situation has not improved much since then. Electricity prices are up, grocery prices are up, and according to some estimates, the cost of living has surged 19.4% for families, with the average household paying an extra $11,400, or someone said $12,400, just to maintain their previous standard of living. My question is this, and it's for the entire panel: how can a responsible energy policy help lessen the economic pain that is being felt across the board? Who wants to go first?
Okay.
Go ahead.
As we know, energy is the number one expense for really any industry, manufacturing or otherwise. And in order for an industry to grow or actually keep the lights on, they need to know that they have reliable, cost-effective energy that's going to provide them with the opportunity to make their widget or whatever they need to do. The unbelievable unaffordability today in America is soul-crushing for so many of my constituents. I talk to people all the time who say they can't afford to send their kid to college this year. They're going to have to wait. They can't afford to fix their car. I have seniors who are taking their medication and cutting pills in half or skipping days or whatever it is they can because they just can't afford all of the higher costs of everything. What groceries are up, 34%, and fuel is 48%. It's crushing for these people. And it's not, the greedy corporate, that's BS. It's the cost of energy, it's the cost of transportation. People can't get their products to market, and they pass along all of those costs to the consumer. A company is not going to absorb those sorts of costs. They have to pass it along. And it is hitting everyone with every single item they buy, every place they go. It's crushing for these folks. And if we don't see a turnaround in it soon, I'm afraid we're going to have a lot of devastation out there. A lot of people are depressed, and we're losing people. Kids are still living at home. They can't afford rent. They certainly can't afford a mortgage. We feel it everywhere. The pinch is everywhere. And even our farmers, I've just had 2 meetings with all of our farmers, and they can't afford fertilizer, they can't afford to put gas in a tractor, they can't afford new machines, they can't afford any of it. So it's up to us to rail against the administration and say, look, it's an energy issue. This is an energy issue. When they shut down the pipeline, when they shut down LNG exports, when they shut down expansion of oil in even Anwar, all of these other things, when they try to kill coal, when we have 200 more years of it right under our feet, right where we are. We could provide that energy in a low cost, effective, efficient, and reliable way. And we're being prevented from doing so. And because of it, we're watching the suffering of millions of people.
Thank you. Anybody else on the inflation? Yes, Mitesh.
I would say, so I've been a student of commodity markets for at least 20 years, and I can tell you that one way to get pricing under control is to make sure that the supply and demand is balanced. What we are seeing right now on the energy side, particularly on the electricity side, is we are starting to see demand take off, but we are not seeing supply take off. And part of the reason is we are building more intermittent sources of energy, but we are not building baseload power. And unfortunately, we are shutting down baseload power. So one way to solve this issue is to basically put a moratorium on coal plant retirements right now till we figure out whether we got supply and demand under control or not. And really, the second thing is you remove subsidies on intermittent sources and deploy those dollars to somewhere where, like healthcare, social security, whatever makes more sense. I think higher energy output would be beneficial in general for entire economic growth, and Americans would benefit from it. There is going to be inflation could be managed with lower energy prices because it's key input, not just in direct energy consumption, but also transportation that flows through your grocery aisles, right? So I think it is important to make sure that we have supply and demand that are more balanced, that could keep pricing under control.
Couldn't agree more. It's very much about production. We right now have too many dollars chasing too few goods. The balance needs to improve from a production standpoint, and what drives that? Certainly energy. It'll increase production, it'll bring prices down. But we also have to be concerned about what adds costs, the interest rates where they are, taxes, regulations. And then I'll go back to what Cameron said about predictability. If we had a federal government that said we're now going to continue exploration in ANWR, we're going to open up offshore drilling in a highly responsible way, we are going to keep the current regulations that exist that are the most stringent in the world on coal production, okay? Just that announcement would create far more. We're going to release LNG exports to allow new exports again. That would expand investment and immediately bring prices down and bring inflation under control. So it's policy.
Good point. Yes, sir. All right, let's talk about some innovation. And this is for Mitesh. This is for you. Consol Energy was the 2023 recipient of the Robert E. Murray Innovation Award presented by the Society for Mining, Metallurgy, and Exploration. Murray Award recipients represent the highest level of professionalism and expertise in the mining and minerals industry. My question is this: could you highlight some of the innovations that Consol is engaged in and why those innovations are so important in the energy field?
So at Consol, we believe that coal is going to continue to be a vital part of our energy mix globally for the foreseeable future. But we also believe that coal is a very adaptable product, that you can have multiple uses of coal. I'll give you an example. For example, power generation, we are all very familiar with. Rachel pointed out steel making. I will also tell you that we export about 60% of our coal, and vast majority of that gets used in cement making. So that's another use of coal that's going to stay for a very long time as the infrastructure gets built out. But we also believe that innovation is a key part of our DNA, and we continue to invest in innovation to identify alternative uses of coal. You mentioned energy, so I'm going to start with energy. Graphite is a critical component and used as an anode in lithium-ion batteries. 90+% of graphite is found in China, and when you look at the supply-demand for graphite as we go towards more of a battery future, there's a huge gap on how much demand we are going to generate in the U.S. and how much domestically produced graphite we have. And one way to solve that issue is by using graphite that comes from coal. And we invested in a company called CBAT, which is doing research on using that graphite coming from coal into lithium-ion batteries. So there's one use. Another use is in aerospace. Most of you don't think of coal when you look at airplanes, but we recently bought a company that converts coal into carbon foam that is used as a tool to make airplane parts. It's right here across the border in Wheeling, near Wheeling in Philadelphia, West Virginia. So the third important leg of our innovation is in building products. I think we are going to need 2 billion new homes to be constructed by the end of this century. And that means building materials is going to be a critical resource that we are all going to need. And we have developed technology that will allow the use of coal to be used in building materials. One such use that we are a little bit more advanced on is decking boards. We are going to have first installation of decking boards that are made from coal. It's actually coal plastic composite with 70% coal in it. So I think we are very excited about what all the alternative uses that we can find, which does not involve power generation. And I think as we move forward, some of these could become significant markets for Consol, but also for the vast resource that we have here in Pennsylvania.
Thank you. All right, my next question is for Senator Bartolotta, and it's about RGGI. In 2022, Pennsylvania became the 12th member of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, also known as RGGI. Could you tell us what's up with RGGI?
Sure, I've got some colleagues laughing right now because they know for 2 years I was tweeting about RGGI and our governor. Okay, I'll say it. I was saying that, well, when John Shapiro was running for office, he would tell one group of environmentalists, oh, absolutely, we have to stay in RGGI and we need a carbon tax, and we need to make them pay their fair share, blah, blah, blah. Or when he would talk to building trades and other folks that rely on energy production, building, repairing plants and all those other things, he was, oh, no, we got to get out of that, Then it was, well, we'll let the legislature decide. Well, we'll let the courts decide. Well, the court decided it was unconstitutional because it is, okay? And so for 2 years, I was tweeting, Josh Shapiro was riding the fence on RGGI so hard he had splinters in his ass. So that's just me. But it's accurate, right? Right, my friend, my spirit animal. Because you can't ride the fence forever and ever and ever. You can't be on two sides of an issue every single day. You can't lie to people right to their face and then stab them in the back. It's ridiculous. And to the Congressman's point, predictability. Having this horrible tax, it literally is a tax on every single molecule of carbon produced in Pennsylvania. And oh, by the way, the other members of RGGI, they don't produce energy, just we do. It's like getting up every morning and providing energy for all of these other states and then having them punch you in the face every day. And when we had the train derailment in East Palestine and we had that massive cloud, that black cloud you could literally see from space, I got a call from the governor the next day because I stuck up for the administration, RPMA, and everybody else at a meeting one day in Beaver County, and he called to thank me. And his first words were, well, I know I'm not your favorite person in the building, but I just wanted to tell you I appreciate what you had to say. I said, okay, well, now let's talk about, because I know, RGGI said, listen, Governor, imagine, if you will, if we were paying for every single molecule of carbon in that massive black cloud that was 1 mile over our border and flowing into Pennsylvania. Every molecule of carbon we're going to pay for. That's RGGI. That's RGGI. So we're producing energy as best we can for all of these other states, and we have to pay for every single molecule. I'm a private pilot. I know which way the wind blows. It blows from west to east. So we've got coal-fired power plants in West Virginia and Ohio having a great time producing energy, right? Their particulates are coming across our border. We would be paying for every single molecule that they're producing. It is absurd, it's unconstitutional, and it's chasing industry away. And it's still in the courts. God knows for how long.
Thank you, Senator. So I've been given the high sign, the 15-minute warning. Is it the 2-minute warning in football? I'm sorry, it's been a while since I've watched. So all right, see, these are some questions that have come in from different folks. So they're handwritten, so if I don't say it correctly, sorry. And just whoever wants to answer. All right, here's a question. Do or will we ever see a new coal power plant permitted in the U.S.? What do you think? Will we ever see a new coal-fired plant or unit permitted in the U.S.?
I certainly believe yes. It's essential. It's not even something that would be nice to have. It's necessary. China, by the way, is building what is it, one every 2 weeks? Coal-fired plant?
A lot.
Do they know something we don't know? It sounds like it. Japan is loading up on coal, stockpiling, having the most dependable energy available for it, for its steel production, for its economy, and in case of a serious crisis. So we've got to face reality and build coal plants, as well as, the cogen plants. We talked about all the reclamation and all that's taking place too. I mean, that's not going to take place without the cogen plants. So it needs to be sustained in the cleanest manner that's economically feasible.
Anybody else want to take a stab at that?
Well, ever is a long time. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. If you say ever, I mean, that's really a long time. And again, the technology improves all of the time. We're also looking at technology that captures methane that's producing from coal mines and things like that. That's a step forward. We're looking at, First Energy had, the Hatfield Ferry coal-fired power plant was taken over by First Energy. They had invested $750 million in all these new scrubbers at 85% clean plant. Wasn't good enough. Just raise that bar. So we have the capability, if the industry is allowed to use their profits for research and development, they're going to keep coming up with better and better things. We are right around the corner from carbon's capture and sequestration. That's a possibility. There was a study in 2009 that said Pennsylvania could sequester 2.4 billion metric tons of CO2. That's a lot of CO2. That was in 2009. Today's technology might even be more. There are things that change every single day. And again, I'll say for the 15th time, we have 200 years worth of coal right under our feet. There is no reason why we can't use more advancing technology to take advantage of that resource in a very clean and effective, efficient, reliable way.
Yes. Mitesh?
So I think if you look at the current policy framework and some of the regulations just we talked about, it makes it very difficult to do that. But we are hopeful. In fact, Consol is involved in a project that is called 21st Century Power Plant Project that tries to create a net zero to low emission power plant. We are in the preliminary stages of engineering design, and we are planning on using waste coal to feed that. So we are hopeful, but the technology is far away. We are still going through the research and development phase of that technology where it involves capturing carbon. I think you could see with the proper policy support, you can get there. But that is the hard part where you look at the rest of the world, they don't have the same shackles on their feet that we do. So I think that's a struggle that we have to deal with, but we are hopeful that we'll get there.
Okay. Ms. Gleason?
I would just echo what Mitesh said. And the senator. If ever is a long time, I think with the advent of technology, she mentioned the carbon capture bill that was passed in June. As that becomes more readily available at scale, I could see it definitely happening. But it's really just, being tied down by policy decisions that don't really match the technology at the moment make it difficult for folks to innovate. And back to what Mitesh said, in all the subsidies that these intermittent, unreliable sources get could be refocused to some of those technologies to, allow us to advance in that space.
All right, thank you. All right, the next question submitted concerns Act 13 impact fees for natural gas. And the question is it time to pursue coal tax reform, and then in parentheses, shift, not new taxes, in Pennsylvania, similar to other states, to bring the money back to those locally who are impacted? And
Natural gas is not my space, so I can't comment on that. I will say I think I might be able to answer that, in that our operators do currently pay a per tonnage tax. The federal SMACRA law that was passed in 1977 that created the regulations to make sure mine operators operate in a responsible way with the environment also created an AML fund, which is an abandoned mine land fund. So operators pay a per tonnage fee that goes to that AML fund that actually comes back to the states. And Pennsylvania has the largest legacy of abandoned mine lands. And some of our western states that produce more coal than us get a little mad because we take some of their money to clean up our scars. But I don't know if that answers the question or not, but in that roundabout way, we do pay a tax to come back to PA.
It's just called something different, so, yeah. Natural gas has an impact tax called an impact fee, yeah.
And it also pays coal worker pensions is all part of that fee. And the impact fee on natural gas actually worked out very well. It works out to be about an effective rate based upon the price of natural gas of about 2%, 2.5%, which was really middle of the pack when it was designed. And it's worked out very well, and it was competitive enough to attract a cracker plant and things of that nature. So.
Okay. All right. Hope that answered the question. All right. Thank you. With the surge of energy demands with AI, et cetera, and the premature shutdown of power plants, who's going to take charge against PJM to stop the push of expenses of grid upgrades to consumers and support keeping these plants alive?
I don't know. I know Maryland's a little upset right now because their Brandon Shores coal plant's on a reliability must-run order from PJM because they don't have the transmission lines. But one of the things that I think is probably back to a policy issue is nobody's really responsible. PJM just manages the grid, but they don't really report to anybody. FERC kind of deals with transmission, and they have NERC underneath them that says, whoa, we're retiring stuff too soon, but they don't really report to anybody. So there's no one holds responsibility for the grid. So kind of a hard question to answer. I don't know.
Okay. All right, moving on to another one. Fayette County is exploring microgrid technology for manufacturing and data centers, using our natural gas to create our electric to create our jobs. What can the state and feds do to get out of the way?
So a microgrid with natural gas is what you're talking about? Yeah. We need people at the top who aren't in the way. So, the microgrids are great, and I know that there are a lot of different new developments that, and again, if we're going to switch to natural gas for a second, there's the ability, if we were smart, that we could put in massive developments and they could use the natural gas right under that property to fuel a microgrid for that community, that warehouse, that whatever. But, it's the regulations are just prohibitive.
Okay. Our last one that I have is with recent 2025 to 2026 PJM auction prices at 800% increase, will this increase coal consumption at our remaining coal-fired plants in Pennsylvania? Keystone and Conemaugh, C-O-N-E-M-A-U-G-H, and extending closure dates past 2028. With the auction prices so high, will that increase coal consumption at the plants and extend the closure dates?
I think it probably depends. I don't know if those plants participated in the capacity auction, but there was I think it was a 700, 800% increase in the capacity auction prices for 25, 26. In those out years, I really think that's just a larger discussion of as we see assets come offline, as we see increased demand from data centers. Virginia's in PJM, and they are the data center alley. So they're pulling power from energy from other places too. So, as assets come off, it's a nice hunk of a payment for those coal plants if they get it. And those two coal plants, by the way, are the two major ones that bailed out the grid during Winter Storm Elliott. So they got bonuses and not fines because they were able to show up. So maybe, hopefully.
Okay. Yes.
Well, at the very least, I think the higher capacity auctions allows them to have an incentive to stay open longer. I think I have had several investors reach out to us as well that what these capacity auctions mean. And there are hedge funds that are looking to get into buying some of these plants and hoping that high prices of capacity auction pays for the rate of return or whatever it is. So there's definitely an incentive that is created to keep those plants open. But it would be interesting to see what the next auction looks like. Is this just a one-off thing, or are we in a permanent trend of higher capacity prices? And if it's the latter, these power plants can look at their profile. Can they invest in environmental controls and certain things that could allow them to stay open longer as well?
Okay. So here's my boss.
Now we're at time, but can we just have a round of applause for our panel?